You are listening to Able Radio, simplifying productivity for small business owners everywhere. If you are looking for 1% improvements that add up to big results, this is the place for you. Every week, we learn about simple systems and tools that will help you build the business and life you've always wanted. Now here's your host, Zachary Sexton.
I've got a conversation scheduled with productivity ninja Matt Cowdroy again, and we had a great conversation on how to get your information out of your head and into a trusted system using Wunderlist was his tool, and creating a second brain. And this externalization, this bringing out the what could be a messy internal process into a visual external process, that taking all your would, could, should, ought tos, your potential next actions, your projects that you want to get started on, the projects that you've started that you need to finish, all of those ideas out into the open where you can see them is a good first step in the process of becoming less stress and more productive and growing a business of one to a business of many. You're going to have to start externalizing this work. You're going to have to start bringing this work out into the world where you and other people can see it. Now, this process has been something I've been doing for years. Matt Cowdroy uses Wunderlist. I use something called Trello. Todoist is another application. Asana is another. And you could even do this with pen and paper. I actually just had a quick call, a quick coaching session. We went to Austin, Java, down the road in Austin, Texas, and I could tell this person was stressed. She was in my networking group, and we hadn't sat down to do a one-to-one yet about what we were doing, but I knew she was stressed, so I kind of had a feeling that we we're going to spend most of the time working on whatever productivity issue she had, and the one that came up and the one that often comes up is email. Dealing with email and how to more effectively respond to the people she needed to respond to. And she's in sales, and one of the things she's responsible for is setting up the appointments that her painting business has, as well as responding to customer support questions and getting quotes back. And that was the big thing, was getting quotes back in an effective method. So I asked her how she was doing it now. And she said, kind of, with an embarrassed look on her face, just whenever I can. She would open up her phone at stoplights, at stop signs, and start responding, and then the light would turn green, and the message would stay in her drafts folder, and she couldn't remember if she sent it or if she didn't send it, and things were falling through the cracks. Things were getting missed. She was losing out on potential sales by not responding to clients or requests quick enough. She was letting things slip in her work as far as her boss and her team in coordinating that information in an effective way. So I said, let's explore something else. Let's explore a different way. So even if you receive hundreds of emails a day, or you could potentially spend your whole day in email, because that is 100% possible, or you feel like you don't have enough time, I want to run through some strategies, some of them that I used with this woman, and some that I've used with other clients in the past, that help you go from somebody who checks email, who the average is 15 times a day. Most of the people that I work with, it's much higher than that, 20, 30 times a day, the number of times you check email, and start to do something else instead. This thing I call processing. It's a mechanical process, and it's a way of making decisions on the front end with every email that comes in as soon as you open it. Because that's where the email overwhelm comes in. That's where the overload comes in, is you open an email and think, ooh, I got to make a decision about that. I'll get back to that later. And then you open the next one, and then you open the next one, and then you open the next one. And then next time you check the email, you've got 15, 20, 30 more emails, and then you have to go back to all those other ones that you didn't make a decision on, and maybe there's some follow-up because you didn't make a decision on that, and then you have to preface that email with an apology about why you didn't get back to them, and that just takes even longer. So it's a vicious cycle, and if you could start to just be a little bit more mechanical about how you go into your inbox and and figure out what actions need to happen, figure out if there's any reference that you need to put away for later, figure out if there's anything that needs to be put on your calendar, or just review the information and send it to archive, delete that information, get it out of your sight and not let it distract you from your important work. So this is a process that I've been teaching people for the last 3.5, 4 years, and it's very effective. I'd say about 5 to 10% of the population actually does email this way, and I guarantee you it will buy back hours a week. It will just buy back hours a week. And the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to processing email is when you're overwhelmed with email. It's not really about the email. It's really about decision making. And the more ambiguous you or your organization that you work for is about decision making, the harder it's going to be to get through your emails. If you're not sure right away how you need to respond, and that uncertainty causes you to just move on and try to get to the easier ones before getting to the more difficult ones, and then let those stew and fester and go back into the system. Or if you're constantly just checking and reading and rereading emails, you're not making those decisions. You're just previewing more information. And gosh dang, we live in the information age. We got enough of that. We need more action and less information. So some things to consider, some things to get started first. So let's tackle the problem. And the first one, not everybody has this, but many people do, is a problem with the amount, with the flow of incoming email. And maybe it's because they've signed up for too many email newsletters, so they get 20 or 30 newsletters from various blogs or from Amazon or social media like Facebook and Twitter and all those other places where you could be getting information. You gave away your email for some little discount or maybe a little ebook, or I mean, heck, I do it on my site. It works. I show you 17 tools that you can use. Some of these I'll be talking about in this podcast right here to get more work done faster. And the reason for that is because I want your email address. And I want your email address so every once in a while I could follow up with you and be like, hey, I'm doing some coaching, or hey, there's this cool webinar, or hey, I've got another podcast coming out, because I am trying to get your attention. I want to respect it. But I want your attention. The more attention I can get from you, the more attention that I can persuade you to give me, the more influence I have in your life. And I'm hoping to influence you in positive ways to reduce the stress, to get work done a little bit more efficiently, to make 1% improvements to yourself and to your family and to your business every single week or every time that we have an interaction. But I want that attention. And so does everybody else. Everyone's vying for your attention. We don't really live in the information age. We live in the attention-grabbing age. And that's where you see all the headlines and blog posts and emails and books and radio shows. They're all vying to grab your attention because it's so limited. But you really need to protect that. And that's kind of the first area that you can start to look into when you want to stop being overwhelmed by email and start taking your attention and your energy and focusing it on the areas that are really going to move the needle. Spending all day in email is not going to move the needle. Doing projects and creating value for other people and spreading that message, that is going to move the needle. Making sure that the work environment is efficient and that you can communicate clearly, that is going to move the needle. Spending all day in email is not. So one way you can take back your attention is to not let your email notify you every time you get a new one. I'd say 60-70% of the time when I work with somebody new, they've got what's called push notifications on their computer as well as their phone. What a push notification does is it gives you a little buzz or a red dot or a bing or a little flash across the screen that's saying, hey, look at me, I've got something new for you. I want you to look at this. And email's not the only place that has these push notifications. You can get them with Facebook and with a number of applications on your phone. And I'd encourage you to right now, if you're listening, just pause this podcast, especially if you're listening on your phone, and go into your settings on the phone. It goes settings, notifications in the iPhone. Probably something pretty similar in Android. I don't have one of those, so I can't really give you the clearest directions, but if you can't find it, you could Google it. That's always an option. And turn off the notifications that are pinging you all day. The only ones that I leave on, and even that I often turn off, is my text. So if somebody has my number and they need to get a hold of me, they can text me, and that's a push notification I allow in. I also allow notifications from Trello with specific boards, but it's a topic for another podcast. So turn those off right now. I'll wait. Once you get them from your phone, you can then do it from your computer, and turn it off there. Whether you're on Outlook or Gmail, Mail, Apple Mail, you could turn them off. Postbox, any sort of client that you have, Outlook. Just turn them off. Protect that attention. And this will be come into the overall process a little bit later. But for now, just have some faith. You still know that inbox is there, right? It's still there. It's all right. Yeah, you'll get back to it. So the email overwhelm is not about the email. It's about the attention, and one way is turning those notifications off. The second, reduce the flow. You can reduce the amount of emails that come into your inbox on a daily basis by unsubscribing from newsletters or marketing materials that don't really serve you very well. So there's a couple ways you can go about doing this. One is if you search unsubscribe in your email client, so whether it's Gmail or Outlook, search for unsubscribe. You'll get a whole list of all the different emails that are automated newsletters. And so what you can do is you can go through them and find the ones that actually kind of bug you, or send you too many of them. If they're sending more than 2 or 3 a week, those are prime candidates to get rid of. So unsubscribe from them right there. So that's the simple method. You could search and unsubscribe. The other way is to go into the largest offenders. I notice LinkedIn is a pretty big offender of sending you lots of emails. And even if you unsubscribe to one, there's 12, 13, 14 other types of emails that are looking to send you notifications. Oh, somebody had a birthday, or it's their 2-year anniversary, or they got a new job, or all of those. You don't really need to know those. You know LinkedIn's there. You can go access it. So unless that's something that's very important for maybe your sales process, keeping top of mind, I would encourage you to go into the settings of LinkedIn and turn that off. Same with Facebook, same with Instagram, same with any other social media site that is pretty consistently getting into your inbox, because they're there. You could go to Twitter and look to see the new notifications. You don't need extra notifications in your email. That's just double processing the information. Not necessary. So that's step 2 with reducing the flow. Step 3 is to use a tool. This tool is a great one. It's been around for a while, especially if you're a Gmail user, but now it's actually available on Outlook. It's called Unroll Me. So if you type into your browser unroll.me, you can find the service, and you put your email address in there, and what it'll do is it does a search in your email inbox for all the newsletters that you've subscribed to. And once it's done with the search, it'll take a few minutes. You'll have to accept a couple notifications and things like that, or accept a little, I wouldn't call it notifications, just say, yes, you can have access to look through my inbox to find all the newsletters. You go in there and it'll find them. I would be surprised if you had less than 200. These things add up. I get 200 in maybe a matter of 2 or 3 months. I'm an offender of signing up for different email lists and looking at all the information that they have just as much as the next person. So you go into that service, and then you'll have 3 options. The first option is to unsubscribe. So it's a great way to unsubscribe from all the different emails that you have going in one batch. So you can go just click, unsubscribe. So if you've got something you don't know what it is, you're not really certain what it is, I would just be like, oh, don't know what it is. It's not important. Unsubscribe. The other option, if you're a little scared to do that with newsletters that you don't know about, or there are some newsletters like, well, I kind of like this, but I don't really need to be getting this in my face every single week or every single day, you could put it into this thing called the roll-up. And the roll-up, the best way to think about it is, instead of getting an article every single hour, you just get a newspaper once a day. So instead of 20 articles, you just get one newspaper once a day. And you can decide what time of day the roll-up will come in. And within that 24-hour period, all the newsletters that you've subscribed for will show up at one time. So it can show up in the morning, afternoon, or evening. And you can then look through all of those emails. And if there's anything that you find interesting, you can click on it and click on the links and still access that information. But if there's nothing in there that you really need to take action on, which 80-90% of the time will be the case, you can then just swipe it and archive that. And instead of needing to archive 20, 25, 30 emails, you've just done it in one batch. So that's where the unroll comes in. Very helpful when just looking through the nice to have but not necessary information. The last option is you can keep it in your inbox. One thing to note is that after 5 or 10 emails, the unroll application will be like, hey, you've reached your limit. You got to share this on social media if you want to access the rest of the Unroll. And just go ahead and do that. I want your friends to know about Unroll Me. You should want your friends to know about Unroll Me. So post it on Facebook or wherever you want to post it. And then continue the process to reduce the amount of email that you got going every day. For it. And then you'll want to pop in there every once in a while and adjust the settings. If you notice there's something you'd really prefer to be in your inbox, you can go into the application and adjust those settings. It's a web application. You don't have to download anything. How they stay alive as a service, because it is completely free, is 1, asking you to share it so they can grow, and 2, there will be an advertisement in the newspaper, essentially. And that's the price. That's the price that you get is that there will be a little bit of an advertisement. I don't think I've ever clicked on one, so they haven't done a good job with making something super interested to me. But whenever I go into my Unroll, I'm always thinking, I'm always priming myself like, okay, I'm gonna archive this. Like, unless there's something really important, I'm gonna archive that. And then I know who's really good at writing the newsletter headlines, because if I consistently click on them, I'm like, oh, that person's good at stealing my attention. But happens much less often. So that is the first thing that you can do is turn off those notifications and reduce the flow of email that's coming into your inbox. The second thing that you can do, or third, I guess we're on step number 3, is to decide the times that you are going to process your email. So you're not going to open up your email every time you sit down on the john or at a stop sign, or you're bored. You're gonna process your email 2 or 3 times a day, or 1 time if you can get away with it. So you're gonna decide. I tend to like to do some focused work in the morning. So I'll do my most important task, which I try to decide the night before. If I don't, I'll decide that morning and work on it. Work on it then, and then I go into email as sort of my little break, and then work on more stuff. And then typically in the afternoon, I will dive back in and process my email that way. When I go into my email, my goal is to make a decision on every single one to get to inbox 0. And by that, I mean literally my email inbox there is no emails left. There's 0 of them, which some people are like, well, that's crazy. That doesn't happen very often, but it's completely possible if you follow the steps that I'm about to talk about. And the benefits are so big. The benefits are so big. The average worker spends almost 35 hours a week in email, and that is just not a sustainable, productive way of going about things. Like I mentioned before, it's about 15 times a day they're checking it. But it doesn't need to be that way. There's ways to communicate within email and outside of email that will allow you to get this work done faster. So it's a bit of a workflow, and I'll add this workflow to the show notes so it's a little more visual. But the first thing that you're going to do in this workflow is when you open up an email, make one decision. So is this email actionable? Do I need to do something? Is something not right with the world, and do I need to take an action to make it right with the world? If it is, okay, we'll make sure to do that. If it's not, then likely it's interesting information that you archive, or maybe a date that you need to put into your calendar, or it's reference material that you can archive and use search, especially if you're a Gmail user, to find in the future, or if it's a PDF or some sort of material that you would like in another source, you can make sure you get it into Dropbox or Google Drive or Evernote. And I would highly suggest making that process a little bit easier on yourself, especially if you're an Evernote user. You can email your emails to Evernote, or make sure when you download to have a nice organizational structure for your Dropbox that's synced to your hard drive, so it's a little bit easy. And if you haven't done that yet, that's another area where you can address in the future to reduce the amount of time that you're spending on email, because that's another area. Like I said, email's not the problem, it's the symptom. And not knowing where to put your reference material is a little bit of ambiguity that's going to slow you down, because you just don't know what to do with it. You're like, I want this information. I know I need this in the future at some point, but I don't know where it goes. So you just don't make a decision and leave it in there. So that's something that you'll address in the future if you don't have a good reference system. I'm a big fan if you have Google for Business. Google Suite is what it's called now. It was formerly called Google Apps. Using Google Drive, getting it on your computer and putting everything in there. You're already paying for it. $5 a month gives you 30 gigs. It's a lot of good storage that you can then look up and search for and email very easily in the future. So that would be my suggestion there. But if you're a Dropbox, Evernote, OneNote user, use your tool du jour and organize it in a way that makes sense for you. So is it actionable or is it not actionable? If it's not actionable, it'll be in the calendar, it'll be referenced, or just archive it. Like, that's it. So those decisions are made for you, or you reviewed the information and you delete it. You decide, I don't even want this to be searchable in my inbox anymore. I'm going to delete this, or I'm going to unsubscribe. That would be what you could do if the information isn't actionable for you. However, if it is, you've got another set of decisions. So if it's a quick, like, hey, Zach, I'm just wondering, are you going to be here, or can you send me this piece of information, or can you give me your feedback on this thing, or can we meet up for coffee later this week? If it's actionable and it's going to take you only 1, 2, 3 minutes to get back to it, maybe less than 5 minutes to get back to it, go ahead and just respond to that email. So respond with the information that they need, or the confirmation, or the feedback, or the action that they want you to take it, and then send that email, and then archive that email. And there's something, if you go into your settings on Gmail, you can do a send to archive. I would suggest going into that. I think it's in Google Labs. If you go to settings, Google Labs, I'll consider putting a screenshot or maybe a small video in the show notes for how to exactly do that. It's pretty simple. And that way you're going to get to 0 emails in your inbox that much quicker without having to press a couple buttons. So less than 5 minutes, okay, you're going to take care of it then. If it's something that is going to be a little bit longer, now you've got a few more decisions to make. So you can defer it. So you can decide, okay, well, I can't really do this right now, but I do want to take care of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down what the result is, what needs to happen, and any of the next actions that are associated with it. So if it's, for example, the woman I was referring to at the beginning, okay, we looked at this email. What do you need to do? It was from her boss. She's like, well, I need to respond with this quote. It's like, okay, if there's nothing else to do in the world, except for respond to this email, what would you do first? Well, I need to log into the CRM and get that information. And then I would need to, there was another bit of information she needed to get. And then I would check on the dates, and then I would email her back. I'm like, okay, let's write down those next actions. They all started with a verb, so she knew exactly how to take action. And she didn't use a to-do list manager or project manager, which is fine. She likes paper, which is great. So we had her notebook with a very special kind of paper that she loved the tactile nature of, and she wrote it down. And then what I did is something that made her heart skip a beat, is I just archived that email. There's another solution that I can tell you about, but I archived that email. She got scared. And I said, why do you need it? And she's like, well, how am I going to respond to that email? I said, well, you have all the information right here. These are the things you need to look this up, look that up, and then go ahead and go ahead and send Sarah, was the name of her boss, the email. And she's like, oh, okay. Some other options to not have a heart attack I could have done was to have a folder that says follow up in your email, and go ahead and move the email to that folder, but out of your inbox, but into that folder, to serve as an extra little reminder, like, okay, did I do all my next actions, even though she had it in paper, just to make sure, or maybe she wanted to respond to that exact email thread. Another thing is I could have snoozed the email, and there's a number of different applications. I'll put them all in the show notes. Boomerang for Gmail is one of my favorites, or if you have a certain applications on your iPhone or Android, Airplane is the one I use, has a snooze capability. So the action, you have it written in your action management paper or manager, and then you set a little reminder to have that email come back just in case you missed it, or in case you want to respond exactly to that email thread. So those are some options there. So you defer it. Maybe it's something and somebody gives you a request, and you don't like that person and you don't want to do that job, and you are just like, I don't want to do this, and you just need to be clear about that. So you just be like, no, it's not happening. You can maybe respond to them and say, hey, thanks but no thanks, but delete it. Just that action that is being requested of you doesn't align with your overall goals or objectives, so you don't do it. It's as simple as that. And it's a big area where I think people get stuck, where it's like, well, it came in, they asked, and now I feel obliged. Not every email that comes in, people can find your email all kinds of different ways, and request your time, and again, requesting your attention, requesting your energy for things that align with their goals, not your goals. So you can delete those. You can have a, and I was going to talk about this a little bit later, but it seems pertinent now. You can have a canned response, which is also something that you can get in Google Labs, or just a response that you have a template for, that you can pop into your email and just say, hey, thank you for the offer. I really appreciate you thinking of me, but I'm going to have to pass this time. And the more templates that you can create like that, the more energy you're going to save in processing these emails, because you're not going to have to reinvent the wheel every time. So that's just one example of a template that you can use. There's hundreds of them. The more you can use, the better, in my opinion, because you've likely answered a question perfectly, just wonderfully, once in your life before, like this exact question. And if you have a feeling that this is going to come up again, or that you've answered this question once a week for your last 25 years of your career, well, let's stop making that answer over again, and let's use the best one and adjust it according to the situation. Change the name, change the date, change whatever pertinent information you need to, but keep the bulk, keep all that thinking that you've done ahead of time. Keep that knowledge source at your fingertips. One tool that I love for this is called Text Expander. I'll link in the show notes where I talk to Greg, one of the founders of Text Expander. We talk about some of the benefits of using it. I'm a personal user, but man, the business applications, especially if you have some customer support issues, are massively helpful, can be massively helpful. So we've got So we've got it. It's actionable. Took less than 2 minutes. Then we go ahead and do it, or it takes less than 5 minutes. Whatever you feel like is best. It could depend on the day. A busy day with a lot of conferences or meetings or sales presentations, you're going to use that 2-minute rule. If it's a slower day, you can maybe bump it up to the 5-minute rule. And then defer it. So that means you're going to write down the result and all the little next actions that are associated with it. And that way you don't have to reread the email and think, well, what actually needs to be done? Sometimes people write 2 or 3 paragraphs and they only need one thing, or maybe they need multiple things. And you can write all those down so you can address those efficiently when you're outside of your inbox at a time when you are actually doing that type of work, when you're in the mode for doing that type of work. So we got that. Third option, this is a wonderful option, is delegate it. Hey, that's not something I want to do. Like, that's Jim's job, or that's I'm gonna start to have my assistant or potentially virtual assistant start to answer these types of questions. Maybe scheduling is something that happens a lot that you'd rather have somebody else coordinate, or maybe you get a tool like Calendly or Schedule Once or Acuity that you've attached to your calendar that you can send a link to somebody and they can find a time that works best for them and a location that works best for you and a time that also works for you. So delegate is the last piece of the processing puzzle. So this is it. That's it. You've processed your email. The overall idea behind this goes to any email that you open, you take an action on. So you've decided to respond to it. You've decided to archive it. You've decided to put it in your calendar. You decided to put it in your reference material. You decided to respond or delay or defer that response into a future date, or you decided to delegate it. So everything you do, you touch it once. You're not gonna open it up and look at it again and read the information again and close it. You're not gonna start one draft and then close it and then start another draft and then close it. You are gonna make those decisions up front, and this is going to save you an immense amount of time and an immense amount of energy, because it's gonna be hyper focused. And like I mentioned before, you're gonna do this 1 or 2 or 3 times a day. I always love time boxing it or timing myself. It's another technique that is called the Pomodoro technique, where you give yourself a fixed amount of time. Usually 25 minutes is associated with Pomodoro. And you set the timer and you focus on that one task. So you focus on email for that set amount of time. And because you're not multitasking, because you're not switching from thing to thing to thing, like doing a little email, chatting with a coworker, working on that report, getting the keynote ready, because you're hyper focused on this one area, you can respond much more quickly. A tool I like to use for this to remind me to focus in that one area, if you're a Gmail user, it's called Email Game. And you just, in the browser, put Email Game, but it's going to be .me. So emailga.me. Into your browser, you can put your email in there, and then it forces you to respond or archive or put it in a folder. It also gives you the option to defer. So if let's say it's some meeting notes for a meeting you have in 3 days, you can defer it for 3 days so that email pops up right at the right time, or you don't have time to answer that person right away, so you defer it and just have that email come back to you right away. So you decide not to take the actions out, but you just send the email out into the future when you know you'll have more space to answer it. Or you can get your reference material out of there. And if you start taking too long, and I think it's more than 2 or 3 minutes, the smiley face starts to frown a little bit. Or if you start skipping emails, you're like, I'll deal with that email later, it turns to a frowny face. So it really forces the action through a little bit of gamification. And then at the end, it says how much time you might have saved, which is just an estimate. But it's pretty rewarding. It's nice to remind yourself that, hey, I need to focus and just get to zero. I usually do this on Fridays when I want to zero my inbox out before the end of the week and just really make sure I do it and not take too much time with it. So Email Game's a great processing tool. Once you have that process down, this may sound a little complicated right now, but really it's like 5 or 6 decisions that you need to make, and it'll start becoming second nature. And if you start learning some keyboard shortcuts, that's another thing in labs that you can do, it can make it even faster. Or you start using the Email Game, it can make it even faster. Some other things to take note of. Sometimes you might be going back and forth, doing a little bit of email ping pong with somebody. And at that point, it might be time to pick up the phone. I often try to default to picking up the phone if I could tell it's going to need a little back and forth. It's going to need some a little bit of collaboration to figure out what the end result of this project is going to be. Or maybe I'm not sure how they feel about it, and I want to listen to them to hear the tone of their voice to see if they're excited about this or they're not. It could be an in-person meeting. Maybe if you're in the same office, you can just stop by and say, hey, I want to talk to you about this. And you can, again, that's another thing you could write down on a piece of paper for following up with people, put it in a folder, or go ahead and put it on a piece of paper, but outside of your inbox. Your inbox is the to-do list that other people get to write on. You never know what it's going to look like each time. So you want your own inboxes that you can control so you don't feel quite so out of control, which leads to overwhelm and overload and stress. So it's all about taking that control back of your time and your energy and attention when it comes to this. So that is another thing to consider, is when the message is best suited outside of email. You may also at your office have instant messaging. Maybe you use Slack or Skype or HipChat for messaging, and that could be another place where you do that connection. Maybe you use Asana or I believe Todoist has this option, and then Trello definitely has this option for your projects. And you can make sure to make that communication in the project, like associated with the project, so you don't have to worry so much about the responding in the email itself. So those are some other ideas. I mentioned a lot of recommendations for outside tools. Another one I'm a big fan of, already mentioned, Calendly is a good way to avoid some of that email ping pong, to make sure that somebody schedules an appointment at the appropriate time for you, because it syncs up with your calendar. You decide ahead of time when it's going to when you're available, so you know when you could potentially be in meetings and when you're not. Deciding ahead of time, all that takes a little bit of work, but boy, does it pay off in saved back and forth and scheduling if you don't have an administrative assistant to help with that. Already mentioned Unroll Me. Boomerang is another application that will allow you not only to send emails out into the future, but you can decide, okay, I'd rather actually have this email be sent Monday morning. So it's Friday afternoon, and you think, gosh, it's going to just get lost in the inbox over the weekend. Let's send it to Monday. So it'll be right on top, so that person gets that notification. So that's another cool thing you can do. Also, if you're a little worried that the person might not respond to an email, you could say, boomerang this back to my inbox if they don't respond. That way you don't have to remember to follow up. It'll come back to you if they don't follow up, or just regardless. Maybe it's what we talked about before. There's a meeting out in the future. You don't need the agenda until that meeting comes. You could take that information and put it into your calendar appointment, or you can just boomerang it back to you at the time that it allows. And another thing that Boomerang for Gmail, this application that I'll put in the show notes, does is it has this little bar on the side that lets you know how good your email is. There are certain emails that are easy to respond to and certain emails that are difficult to respond to. Long emails are difficult to respond to. Emails that use a lot of verbose vocabulary are difficult to respond to. Emails that don't ask any questions are difficult to respond to. Emails that ask too many questions are difficult to respond to. Emails that are slightly negative, aren't as less likely to respond to. The emails that are more positive, you're more likely to respond to. So Boomerang knows this. It gathered data on all the emails that are responded to and all the ones that aren't, and it'll show you how likely your email is going to be responded to based off the text that it sees you using, off the metadata that it sees you using. So it's pretty cool. I've definitely rewritten some emails to simplify them or ask a few less questions, or just be a little bit more concise with my messaging or what I'm looking to get out of based off that Boomerang for Gmail application. Already mentioned canned responses as another recommendation. So if you're a Gmail user, this is something that you go into the settings and labs. If you're an Outlook user, the workaround is to actually use signatures. So Outlook allows you to have an infinite amount of signatures. So instead of using a signature, You just say, okay, well, I want this signature to be my nice no response. So this is how I'm deleting an obligation that I don't want to commit myself to. Write it up the best, nicest way you know possible, and then use that as an email signature. So that's the way to do that thinking once. Or if you're really feeling a little geeky, Text Expander is a great tool, and then Email Game already mentioned there too. So that is my process. This is something that I love working with people on. It's I call it my inbox therapy. That this is most of the information that I give. I first start with some empathy, saying I know you've got a lot of emails. Then I don't necessarily go into, okay, it's not really about the email. I let the people that I work with think it's about email. So if you're working with me, sure, it's about email or it's about the other things. And then we tackle the problem by first reducing the attention by reducing the amount of emails that are coming in, and also turning off those notifications that are coming in so it's not pulling at your attention every minute of the day. Then I like to get people to inbox zero or close to it by archiving everything that's older than 6 months old. People will get to you if it's an emergency, even though if they sometimes people make it seem like an emergency when they email you. It's not. It's their emergency. It's not your emergency. So you take off all the old emails, and then you archive the ones that aren't pertinent anymore, and you try to get to inbox zero. That's something that I can be done in 20 to 30 minutes, even if you might not think it can. You can. I worked recently with a real estate agent that I think she had 2,000, 3,000 emails, and we got to zero, or we got to 36 rather in about 30 minutes, and then she was able to process those emails from then in a session that she did away because she knew how to do it. So then make those decisions on the front end. You're processing email at a certain time of day. So go ahead and you can put those calendar appointments in, or you can decide, okay, after my first important task or after lunch. Actually, after lunch is pretty good because you're normally maybe a little sluggish then. You're still digesting food. So go ahead and tackle some of that email then, especially some of that processing-based email. Okay, here's the attachment. Here's when I can meet. Those types of simple ones. And the more templates that you have, the better this will be. Make those decisions on the front end with that process that I described. That'll be in the show notes. And know when to pick up the phone. Know when to walk over and connect in person. And use some tools if that's going to help you be more effective. But this is something that I guarantee you take an hour to go through this and implement what I just talked about, or feel free to zacharysexton.com/hire-me. $150 inbox therapy session. I will help walk you through this step by step. You'll get that 90 minutes back that we're spending together every week for the rest of your life. Probably more. Usually it's 2, 3, 4 hours a week that people save just by making this small change. You'll be in the top 5-10% of email users. You'll be able to take hundreds of emails a day. You can, even if you can't reduce the flow, you need to have all these emails coming in for whatever reason. You can't not have them. I question that a little bit, but even if you're required, or your organization that you're working in, you're not necessarily the lead decision maker of that, and there's a lot of CCs and BCCs and all this other noise coming in your inbox. You can still get your email down to something that takes an hour to 90 minutes a day versus the 5 to 6 hours that many professionals spend in their inbox every single day. So I hope this was helpful. I'm going to probably put this as a supplement to the discussion that Matt Cowdroy and I have in a few days. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at coach@zacharysexton.com or hit me up at Twitter at ZWSexton. I would be happy to help you out. Take care. Happy to announce a text message that I received from the woman I was mentioning at the top of the show. It's been a couple weeks, and she sent me an unsolicited text that said, "Zach, you are the best. A weight has been lifted off my shoulders. I don't feel so scattered, and I'm getting through my emails on a daily basis. I don't know how to thank you. So I was thanks enough. It makes me happy to help people out like that. So hopefully you'll be sending me a text or a tweet or an email or maybe a comment in the show notes sometime in the future saying that you felt that similar weight lifted off your shoulders now that you know the best way to handle your email, not by checking, but by processing. Thanks so much for tuning in. See you next Productive Wednesday.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Able Business Radio. Zach wants to help more small business owners like you make 1% improvements that add up to big results. Was this show helpful? Pay it forward. Subscribing and writing a review in iTunes is one of the best ways to help more people find out about the show. Thanks again for tuning in. We hope to see you here next Wednesday, where we will continue to share 1% improvements that will help you become a more useful, less stressed business owner.